how do you get into Luthiery in the first place, becoming a Luthier? From John Michael, he said he's looking to get into it, but he just doesn't know how to start. What kind of things would you recommend?
Well, I think we'll both answer this one, but it has become a little bit more. What's the word? Doable in a sort of a linear fashion. I mean, in my day, there weren't any college courses. I mean, there weren't really enough luthiers that you could go and get training from. I mean, now there are college courses, I mean, 2 or 3 of the people who've worked here, Neil, who's currently with us, did a 3-year course at Leeds College of Music. But we've come to it through different routes. I mean, for me, I just always made guitars. I made guitars when I was 13, 14 years old. But I had a stint in engineering and a stint playing musical instruments, and the two things kind of gelled. And the thing that really got me believing that it was possible was meeting a guy called Tony Zamatis, who some of you may have heard of, who was a great guitar maker of best known in the 60s and 70s, and sadly no longer with us, worked right through into the 80s. But I didn't really learn a lot from Tony, apart from him keep telling me not to do it professionally, because there wasn't any money in it. But I think it's a sort of dogged thing, really. It's wanting to do it and just learning. But obviously, if you go, I mean, like Martin, which I'll hand over to now, came to us as a customer. But you had a background in fine arts, or
so I came as a customer, and then I just hung around long enough until they gave me a job. But I came from more the arts and craft background, so I did a degree in what was then called design and crafts, which was a fantastic course. Actually, it was really good, and sadly it's not available anymore. Where I actually studied ceramics, so I was actually trained to be a potter. And there has been a lot of transferable skills, really. You know, the attention to detail, the just general approach to crafting an instrument,
having an eye for stuff. I mean, I think that's that thing about the general approach. There's two aspects to guitar making. It's not science, and it's not. I mean, it is science and it is art, or it is engineering and it is art, because the two things are so. Most things, there are aesthetics involved in everything. I mean, that's a very functional bit of material that holds the strings. But it also has an aesthetic aspect to it. Anything that's pleasing to the eye, but also the 3D feeling. I mean, I remember years ago, a guy came and worked for me. This is right in the early days of employing people, or having people working with me. We had an older guy who'd worked in a foundry as a pattern maker, and the foundry pattern makers are the most skilled woodworkers, because they're working with wood to engineering quality tolerances. Because engineering, sort of metal stuff is going to be made from it, exactly. And Tommy came to work for us, and I thought, ideal man to carve necks, but actually, or finish necks, but actually, he wasn't, because he would take the measurements, and that's how he would recreate it. So I'd give him a depth and a width and a general, circumference at one end and the other. And then I'd feel it, and he'd say, "Is that all right?" And it doesn't quite feel like quite right. And he would say, "Why?" And I couldn't really answer, because he didn't play an instrument at all, if you see what I mean. I mean, I don't think you have to be a great musician, but I do think you have to have a feel for the instrument, even if you hit it with sticks. It's sorry, Steve. You've got to have some sort of feel for the instrument, haven't you?
Yeah, sure, I agree. Yeah, that's a very good point.
And it's it is that mixture of art and science, and it's the thing of thinking round corners. I remember talking to a sculptor once who was trying to teach it as an evening class to people, who would draw the picture of an owl on the front of a piece of wood, and then try to carve it, and it would end up as this kind of outline, if you see what I mean. And he was saying they can't think round corners, and I think that's part of the thing. It's a problem-solving thing, and because we're dealing with. I mean, that's always going to machine the same. It's wood. It's metal, and a piece of plastic is always going to react in the same way because it's fundamentally the same thing. But wood isn't. Wood. Each piece, it's got grain, and you can see it. The grain is slightly, even though that's a quarter sawn. The grain's very square on, and the neck is, and the wood is fairly straight. It's not consistent. You can make two instruments from the same piece of wood, and they will sound different. Because the resonance and the grain patterns and stuff are all, and it's understanding these things, and it's not something you can teach in 5 minutes. I mean, you can, it's interesting for me seeing people who came out of college, having learnt to make instruments, but because they can't afford for them to make one every day, over 3 years. They make one or two a year, and you don't have enough repetitive, you only learn things by listening to the last one and the next one, if you see what I mean, exactly. Or feeling the last one and the next one. I mean, I've been doing this now for 40 years, and there's a load of stuff I just don't know, and I mean, we have these discussions all the time. Do you think this neck joint is better why is it that if the neck is it's brighter, why is it, and it does quarter sawn 3-piece, does a quarter sawn 3-piece neck sound better than or more even than a 1-piece slab sawn? Well, yeah, it should do because it's stiffer, but sometimes it doesn't, and then you have to work out why, and the other things that go into it. But the other, Martin came from a craft background. The other side is the engineering background. I mean, you've done a bit of engineering, Steve. You've also done a bit of woodwork before you came here.
But you are a drummer.
Sorry. Yeah, and I mean, Dean was very much an engineer. He spent most of his life fashioning metal, and that gives you another perspective. Mm-hmm. But I think watching. I mean, obviously there are lots of tricks and you learn stuff, and as I say, most of what I know I taught myself or just picked up. Now there's a million YouTube videos and some of them are right, if you see what I mean. But there's no even right way of doing anything, is there? I mean,
there isn't. There really isn't.
There's some great luthiers that produce great instruments, but don't do it the same way. Don't have the same approach. I mean, going back to dear old Tony Zamatis. Nobody told him how to do it at all. He was famous for making high quality acoustics. He made them for all sorts of people you've heard of. But his strutting patterns were nothing like the classical strutting patterns that everybody else and all the big, because he didn't know. He just made it work. So sorry, I can't. It's another one of those ones where you have to have a one-to-one conversation with somebody. I think. Have we got any more questions?
I think just to touch on that, I think there are a couple of courses still running. If you wanted to go down the college route, I think there is one at South Thames College in London, because we know. Yeah,
somebody's gone there. The old Goldsmiths Art College. I think that was the London School of Furniture. Yeah. Is that a different one, or is that the same one?
I'm not quite sure.
But there's some short courses as well, aren't there? There's some people who offer a month course, and you go all 3 weeks. And you go and you make a guitar. Mm. They're quite expensive, obviously, but so's going to college these days. And there aren't really enough. There aren't many people like us that have more than There are lots of individual luthiers. 1 or 2 people working together. I can only think of 3 or 4 in this country of people that of the sort of number of people. I mean, there's 6 of us on a regular basis, plus various people who work on the outskirts, like Hayden and Alan and people like that we draw on. but I can't think of many that will employ or work in larger groupings.